They are 6 minutes from being surrounded, Admiral, and they are arguing about pineapple. Analyst Siravel said it so quietly that the bridge of the Dominion sphere seemed to shrink around her. Admiral Varesh turned from the tactical display. 32 Varkesian warships waited beyond the sensor shadow of Morrow Gap, positioned with the patience of hunters who had done this many times before. At the center of the display, one human cruiser drifted through open space at an almost insulting 12,000 miles per hour. The USS Resolute had no escort, no active weapons, no distress call, nothing suggesting its crew understood what was waiting for them. Varesh extended one long, blue-gray hand. "Play it again." Sira hesitated, then restarted the intercepted transmission. A woman's voice filled the alien bridge. "Pineapple absolutely belongs on pizza, and I am tired of pretending this is complicated." Another human answered immediately. "Claire, putting fruit on pizza is how civilizations collapse." Someone laughed in the background. "Tomatoes are fruit, Brooks. Do not bring science into this." More laughter. Varesh stared at the tactical display. His intelligence officers had spent 3 days breaking into the Resolute's short-range communication leakage. They had expected navigation codes, tactical reports, maybe nervous messages to Earth. Instead, they had collected 27 minutes about coffee, baseball, somebody named Danny forgetting to call his mother, and now an increasingly passionate argument about a circular human food. "This is their command crew?" Varesh asked. "Lieutenant Claire Bennett, Communications," Sirius said. "Chief Daniel Brooks, Engineering." Commander Jack Mercer is believed to be present, although he has spoken only twice. Varesh's expression hardened. He had defeated species that prayed before battle, species that sang, species that became silent once they sensed death approaching. Fear always left fingerprints. Humans, apparently, discussed lunch. The recording continued. "Commander," Bennett called, "settle this." "Pineapple. Yes or no?" A tired male voice answered somewhere farther from the microphone. "I have spent 23 years keeping people from shooting at each other. I am not getting involved in this." The humans laughed again. Several Varkesian officers exchanged looks. Varesh did not. He leaned toward the tactical map. "Threat awareness?" "No change," an officer reported. "No encrypted burst transmissions. No defensive formation. Their weapons remain inactive. Then they have not detected us." Sira looked down at another display. Something bothered her. The Resolute had made a course correction 11 seconds earlier. Tiny, barely worth logging. 0.7 degrees starboard. It did not move the humans away from the ambush. In fact, it carried them deeper into Morrow Gap. "Admiral." Varesh raised a hand. "Begin final positioning." Across the map, 32 markers started closing around the solitary human ship. Sira looked back at the intercepted channel. Bennett and Brooks were still arguing. Then the Resolute adjusted course again. Another fraction of a degree. Sira enlarged the navigation plot. Her unease sharpened. Varesh saw a distracted crew drifting unknowingly into his trap. Sira saw something else. The humans were still laughing, still talking about pizza, still behaving like nothing in the universe was wrong. But their ship was moving with the quiet precision of someone who knew exactly where the walls were, and exactly where the door would be. On the USS Resolute, Lieutenant Claire Bennett watched a tiny amber symbol blink in the corner of her communications display and felt the joke die in her throat. She did not stop smiling. Across the bridge, Chief Daniel Brooks was still defending what he called the basic dignity of pizza, waving a half-eaten slice like evidence in a courtroom. "I am telling you, Claire, pineapple is what happens when nobody in the kitchen has adult supervision." Claire glanced toward Commander Jack Mercer. He sat in the command chair with a metal coffee mug resting against one knee, looking almost bored. Only someone who had served with him for years would have noticed that he had stopped drinking. "Commander," Claire said casually, "I think we have company." Mercer looked at her. "How long?" 11 minutes, maybe 12. Passive signal reflection. "Somebody has been riding the edge of our communications band." Brooks slowly lowered his pizza. The bridge became quieter without anyone being told to be quiet. Mercer asked, "Can they hear us?" Claire checked the signal again. "Probably. I cannot tell how much." Mercer looked toward the main display. Morrow Gap stretched ahead as a black river between two pale stars. Nothing showed on active sensors. That bothered him more than seeing an enemy ship would have. Empty space was rarely empty when somebody was listening. Do not change transmission protocols, Mercer said. Claire turned in her chair. You want me to keep the channel open? I want whoever is listening to believe we have not noticed. Brooks stared at the slice in his hand. So we keep talking about pizza? Mercer finally took a sip of his cold coffee and immediately regretted it. Chief, for the first time in your career, your terrible opinions may have strategic value. A few nervous smiles appeared around the bridge. Claire understood what Mercer was doing. Nobody had announced battle stations. Nobody had sounded an alarm. The youngest navigation officer, 22-year-old Mason Reed, was still breathing too quickly, but his hands remained steady on the controls. Mercer leaned toward him. Mason, give me 7/10 of a degree starboard. Nice and easy. Yes, sir. The stars shifted almost imperceptibly. Claire returned to her microphone. For the record, Hawaiian pizza was invented by a Canadian. So blaming America is historically inaccurate. Brooks caught on immediately. That somehow makes it worse. While they argued, Mercer pulled up an old survey of Morrow Gap. He remembered the region from a navigation briefing years earlier. Unstable gravitational currents, mineral dust, sensor distortion. Dangerous if entered carelessly. Useful if you understood it. Claire muted herself for 3 seconds. I am seeing another reflection. Mercer looked at her. One ship. She shook her head. No, sir. Multiple sources. The humor left Brooks's eyes. Mercer studied the dark display, then the faces around his bridge. These were not symbols on a tactical screen. They were people who had families, bills, weekend plans, and food waiting in refrigerators back home. Mercer felt fear settle into his stomach, cold and familiar. He let it stay there. How many? Claire worked the passive array. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Her face tightened. I cannot get a clean count. Best estimate. Claire swallowed. More than 20. Nobody spoke. Mercer looked at the map of Morrow Gap, then at the invisible ships closing around them. All right, he said quietly. Keep arguing. Admiral Varesh had spent 40 years learning what fear sounded like, and the humans were beginning to annoy him because they refused to sound afraid. On the Dominion Spear, the intercepted voices continued through the speakers while 32 Varkesian ships tightened their formation around Morrow Gap. You know what the real problem is? Daniel Brooks said. People keep trying to improve pizza. Pizza was already finished. We solved it. Claire Bennett laughed. That might be the most American sentence you have ever said. Varesh watched the human cruiser make another tiny course adjustment. 0.4 degrees this time. His tactical officer barely acknowledged it. Navigation drift, the officer said. Their vessel is entering the gravitational boundary. Siravel did not answer. She had started building a behavioral profile of the human crew, and every new piece made less sense than the last. Most intelligent species became predictable under pressure. Conversations shortened. Movements sharpened. Social behavior disappeared as survival instincts took control. The humans did almost the opposite. The deeper their ship traveled into dangerous space, the more ordinary their conversation became. Earlier, Bennett had complained about coffee. Brooks had mentioned a baseball game he had missed. Someone had reminded a crew member to call his mother when they reached port. Varesh interpreted all of it as carelessness. Sira was no longer certain. Their heart rates? She asked. A medical intelligence officer checked the weak biometric estimates gathered from intercepted wearable signals. Elevated slightly. How slightly? Within normal operational range. Sira looked toward Varesh. Admiral, something is wrong. He did not turn. Yes. Their species has apparently built an identity around arguing over food. That is not what I mean. She moved closer to the tactical table. They are approaching a region our own navigation models classify as unstable. They should be correcting away from it. Varesh enlarged the map. They do not know we are behind them. They are making mistakes. Then why are the mistakes consistent? That made him look at her. Sira placed the last 4 course corrections on the display. 0.7 degrees. 0.4. 0.9. 0.3. Each was insignificant alone. Together, they formed the beginning of a smooth arc. Varesh studied it for several seconds. A damaged guidance system. There is no evidence of damage. An inexperienced navigator. Their navigator has logged more than 1,800 flight hours. Varesh's jaw tightened. He had conquered commanders who tried deception before. They always became too clever. Too theatrical. Humans were not mysterious simply because they behaved strangely. You are assigning intelligence to coincidence, he said. And you are assigning stupidity to behavior you do not understand, Sira replied. The bridge went silent. Varesh slowly faced her. For a moment, Sira wondered whether she had finally pushed too far. Then he turned back to the map. Continue the operation. On the Resolute, Commander Jack Mercer watched the passive contact estimate climb from 28 to 31. Mason Reed quietly entered another course correction. Claire kept the open channel alive. Brooks was now explaining why deep dish pizza was technically a casserole. Mercer barely heard him. His attention was on an old survey line buried beneath 12 years of navigation data. There it was, a narrow gravitational current twisting through Morrow Gap like an invisible river. He leaned toward Mason. Can you ride that? Mason studied the numbers. Maybe. Mercer looked at him. I need better than maybe. Mason swallowed, recalculated, then nodded. Yes, sir. But whoever follows us will have to match every correction. Mercer glanced at the growing field of invisible contacts behind them. That is what I am counting on. Back aboard the Dominion Spear, Sira watched the Resolute make one more tiny turn. This time she stopped looking at each correction separately. She connected them. The completed curve appeared across her screen, wrapping neatly around a region the Varkesian charts marked as empty space. Sira stared at it. Then she opened an older gravitational survey. Her stomach dropped. Admiral, she said. Varesh did not answer. Sira stood. Admiral, they are not wandering into Morrow Gap. 32 ships continued following the human cruiser. Sira looked at the route ahead and finally understood what the humans were doing. They are choosing where we follow them. They know we are here, Sira said. And for the first time Admiral Varesh did not dismiss her immediately. The words hung over the Dominion Spear as the human cruiser slipped deeper into Morrow Gap. Varesh studied the curved route Sira had reconstructed. 32 Varkesian ships were following the same path, spread across nearly 4,000 miles of dark space. If they knew, he said, they would run. Sira kept her voice level. Maybe they are. Toward an unstable gravitational field. Maybe they know it better than we do. Varesh turned to his tactical officer. Move the forward group in. I want that ship contained before it reaches the inner gap. 12 Varkesian vessels accelerated. On the Resolute, the passive display suddenly filled with movement. Claire Bennett stopped talking about pizza for half a second, then caught herself. And another thing, Brooks, barbecue chicken pizza, is perfectly legitimate. Daniel Brooks stared at her. Now you are just trying to hurt me. Commander Jack Mercer watched the contacts closing. They are accelerating, Mason Reed said. 12 ships, maybe more behind them. Mercer felt the weight of every person aboard settle across his shoulders. 184 people. He knew some by name, others only by face. He knew Claire sent her mother flowers every birthday and always ordered them late. He knew Brooks kept photographs of his daughters taped inside an engineering locker because regulations said he could not put them beside the reactor controls. He knew Mason was 22 and trying very hard not to look 22. Mercer was afraid for every one of them. He simply had work to do first. Distance to the shear line? 800 miles, Mason said. At current speed, for minutes. Can we make it 3? Mason looked at the navigation model. It will be rough. Rough is fine. Mercer keyed the internal command circuit, keeping it off every frequency the enemy might hear. All departments, secure for high-gravity maneuvering. No general alarm. Keep external emissions unchanged. Around the Resolute, ordinary routines quietly disappeared. Equipment locked into place. Engineering redirected power. Medical teams secured their stations. Nobody made a speech. Nobody needed one. Brooks left the bridge at a quick walk. I am heading downstairs. If you break my engines, Commander, I am billing you personally. Get in line. Claire smiled despite herself. Then her sensor display flashed red. They are painting us. Mercer turned. Weapons lock. Not yet. Targeting sweep. The first Varkesian ship emerged from sensor shadow behind them. Then another. Then 5 more. Sleek silver shapes appeared against the stars, no longer bothering to hide. Mason whispered, "Well, that answers the question." Mercer leaned forward. "Stay on course." "Sir, they are gaining." "I know." A brilliant warning pulse crossed the Resolute's bow, close enough to wash the bridge windows in white light without touching the ship. Claire flinched. Varesh's voice entered the open channel. "Human vessel, reduce speed and surrender navigation control. You are surrounded. Mercer looked at Claire. She covered her microphone. Do I answer? Not yet. Another warning pulse passed wide to starboard. The Varkesian ships closed from both sides, trying to force the Resolute away from the gravitational current. Mercer watched the distance counter fall. 600 miles. 500. 4. Mason tightened his grip on the controls. Commander, once we cross that line, there is no clean turn back. Mercer looked through the forward glass at what appeared to be perfectly empty space. Somewhere inside that darkness was the only chance his crew had. That is the idea. On the Dominion Spear, Sira watched the human ship accelerate instead of surrendering. Varesh finally understood that the laughter had never meant ignorance. Cut them off, he ordered. His fleet surged forward. On the Resolute, Mason watched the final 100 miles disappear. Sheer line in 5 seconds. Mercer set his cold coffee down. Everybody hold on. The stars ahead suddenly bent, and the Resolute vanished into the dark. The Resolute did not disappear. It fell sideways. For 3 long seconds, every star outside the bridge stretched into pale arcs as Morrow Gap grabbed the cruiser and pulled it along a gravitational current no Varkesian chart had bothered to map. Mason Reed fought the controls with both hands. Velocity climbing. 14,000 miles per hour. 15,000. The deck tilted beneath them. Claire Bennett caught the edge of her console before her chair could turn. Please tell me this was the plan. Commander Jack Mercer kept his eyes on the navigation display. The plan was to get here. That was not my question. Then you probably know the answer. Claire gave him a look, then returned to her instruments. Behind them, the first Varkesian ships crossed the sheer line. Their formation immediately began to spread. Not dramatically, not enough to make anyone celebrate, but enough. 3 ships drifted several miles apart, while their navigation systems fought to correct against forces their computers had not predicted. Mercer keyed the internal circuit. Brooks, talk to me. Daniel Brooks answered from engineering over the low hum of machinery. Engines are holding. Coolant pressure is ugly, but ugly still counts as working. I need the maintenance pods. There was a pause. All three. Those are $6 million of equipment. Send me the invoice. Brooks sighed. I knew you were going to say that. 3 unmanned maintenance pods released quietly from the Resolute's lower bay. Normally, they repaired exterior hull damage and serviced navigation buoys. Now they drifted into 3 carefully chosen points along the gravitational current, broadcasting nothing. Claire watched them separate. What exactly are we doing with those? Mercer enlarged the old survey map, giving their computers bad choices. Mason understood first. Their ships are using active correction. Mercer nodded. Every time the current moves them, their navigation systems compensate. If Brooks can make those pods look like stable reference points, their computers will correct against something that is moving with us. Claire stared at him. So we are not jamming them. No. We are lying to their autopilot. Politely. Despite herself, Claire smiled. On the Dominion Spear, Sira Vell was no longer smiling at anything. Our forward formation is widening, she reported. Varesh watched the human cruiser remain centered in the gap while his ships struggled behind it. Corrected. They are correcting. That is the problem. Sira enlarged the telemetry. Every Varkesian navigation computer was independently trying to maintain formation against the same 3 reference signals. These markers were not here before. Varesh leaned closer. Human devices? I believe so. His expression hardened. Destroy them. The order went out. A Varkesian vessel targeted the nearest pod. Before it could act, the signal vanished. Then it reappeared 40 miles away. Brooks's voice came over Mercer's circuit. They noticed. Can you keep them interested? Commander, irritating expensive machinery is why I became an engineer. Claire raised a finger. Incoming transmission. Varesh's voice filled the bridge. Commander Mercer, your vessel cannot escape this region. Stop your engines and surrender. Mercer looked at the tactical display. 32 ships were still behind him. Too many. Too close. His trick had bought minutes, not victory. Claire waited. Want me to mute him? Mercer shook his head. Then he noticed something on Mason's screen. The Varkesian formation had changed. They were no longer surrounding the Resolute. They were stacking themselves into a narrow pursuit corridor to survive the current. Exactly what he needed. Mercer looked at Claire. Open our regular crew channel again. She blinked. Now. Brooks was still connected from engineering. You have got to be kidding me. Mercer leaned back, forcing his shoulders to relax. Chief, we never finished the discussion. Claire understood. Her grin returned. Fine. Pineapple stays. Brooks groaned loudly enough for the intercepted channel to catch it. Absolutely not. On the Dominion sphere, Varesh heard the humans start arguing again while his fleet struggled to maintain formation. His confidence returned for one fatal moment. Cirrus did not. She stared at the three moving reference signals, then at the narrow corridor their ships had formed. Suddenly she understood why the humans had wanted them together. Admiral, she whispered. Varesh ignored her. Syrah turned toward him. They are not trying to escape us. The final maintenance pod reached its assigned position. On the Resolute, a green light appeared on Mercer's display. Syrah looked at the entire Varkesian fleet packed into one predictable line. They are arranging us. Admiral, break formation now. Syrah Vel had never raised her voice on the bridge of the Dominion Spear before. This time, every officer heard her. Varesh turned slowly. Explain. The humans pushed us into a single pursuit corridor. Those maintenance pods were not meant to damage us. They were shaping our navigation. Varesh looked at the tactical display. 32 Varkesian ships stretched behind the Resolute in a narrow line, each vessel depending on the one ahead for clean sensor data through the gravitational interference. For the first time, the arrangement looked less like a pursuit and more like a queue. Order lateral separation, Varesh said. Syrah shook her head. The current is too strong. If every ship moves at once, we lose formation completely. Then we do not move every ship. Varesh stepped closer to the display, and something cold returned to his expression. Syrah recognized it. He had finally stopped underestimating Mercer. That should have made her feel better. It did not. Forward group, Varesh ordered. Cut engines for 8 seconds. Syrah stared at him. Admiral, that will let the current push them across the human route. Exactly. On the Resolute, Mason Reed saw it happen first. 6 Varkesian ships suddenly dropped speed and slid sideways through Morrow Gap. Commander, they changed tactics. Mercer leaned forward. The enemy vessels were no longer chasing him. They were drifting across the gravitational current ahead, forming a moving wall between the Resolute and the open space beyond the gap. Claire Bennett muted the crew channel. That does not look good. It is not. Mercer had expected Varesh to keep pushing. Instead, the alien admiral had accepted temporary disorder to take away the human's exit. It was smart. Worse, it was fast. Brooks, how much reserve power? Mercer asked. The engineer answered from below. Depends how attached you are to having lights tomorrow. Not very. Then I can give you 12%. Make it 15. Sure. I will just ask physics to be flexible. Mercer almost smiled. Tell physics I owe it 1. Ahead, the 6 alien ships continued spreading. Behind them, the remaining fleet stabilized. The trap Mercer had built was closing around him from both directions. Varesh opened a transmission. His voice was different now. No arrogance. No lecture. Commander Mercer, I understand what you attempted. Mercer glanced at Claire. Keep it open. You used our pursuit behavior against us, Varesh continued. Clever. But clever is not the same as victorious. Mercer studied the tactical map while listening. He is buying time, Claire said quietly. Mercer shook his head. No. He is telling us he learned. That worried him more. Varesh had made one bad assumption. He was not going to make it twice. Mason pointed at the display. Forward ships are charging something. Claire checked the energy signatures. Navigation projectors. They are creating an artificial stabilization field. Mercer understood immediately. If the Varkesians stabilized the inner gap, the maintenance pods would become useless and the alien fleet could spread out again. Their advantage would disappear in less than 2 minutes. Brooks came over the circuit. Commander, I have the 15%. I also have several engineers who would like to know whether we are going home today. Mercer looked around the bridge. Claire was waiting. Mason was scared but steady. Nobody needed reassurance they would recognize as fake. That is the plan, Chief. Good. My daughters will be annoyed if I miss Sunday breakfast. The words hit Mercer harder than any warning alarm. He looked again at the map. There had to be another move. Then Claire's console chirped. Commander, the enemy stabilization field is interacting with our pod signals. How? It is amplifying them. Mercer turned toward her. Claire stared at the numbers, then slowly smiled. They think they are clearing the interference. Mercer understood. But they are strengthening our reference points. By almost 400%. On the Dominion sphere, Syrah saw the same change 1 second later. 3 human signals suddenly burned bright across the navigation network. Her face went still. Admiral. Varesh looked at her. What now? Syrah watched every Varkesian ship automatically lock onto the amplified signals as trusted navigation anchors. We just connected their devices to our entire fleet. Disconnect the stabilization field, Syrah said. Varesh did not hesitate this time. Do it. Across the Varkesian formation, navigation projectors shut down one after another, but the 3 human maintenance pods did not disappear from the network. Their signals remained embedded in 32 guidance systems, copied into local navigation tables as trusted reference points. Syrah worked through the problem at frightening speed. The ships are still correcting against them. Delete the references. The computers keep rebuilding them from neighboring vessels. Varesh stared at the tactical display. The very system designed to let his fleet share navigation data was now spreading the human deception faster than his officers could remove it. On the Resolute, Claire Bennett watched Varkesian ships begin making small, contradictory corrections. Commander, it worked. Jack Mercer did not celebrate. For how long? Maybe 90 seconds. Then we have 90 seconds. Mason Reed looked toward the 6 ships blocking their exit. They are still in front of us. Mercer studied their positions. Varesh had placed them well. There was no clean path through without turning the Resolute into exactly the kind of target the Admiral wanted. Mercer tapped the internal circuit. Brooks, can you move Pod 3? Move it where? 20 miles toward the outer edge of the shear. Silence. Then Brooks said, that is going to make their computers think stable space is somewhere it definitely is not. That is the idea. I am starting to understand why nobody plays poker with you. Pod 3 fired its small maneuvering thrusters. The effect spread almost immediately. Several Varkesian ships adjusted toward the false reference. Others corrected against them. Their neat pursuit line began opening like a zipper. Varesh saw it happen. Manual navigation. All ships. Syrah looked up sharply. 32 vessels cannot coordinate manually inside this current. They do not need to coordinate. Varesh pointed at the Resolute. They only need to stop one ship. The fleet changed again. Navigation computers went dark. Individual captains took direct control. The confused formation became less precise, but far less predictable. Claire's smile vanished. He just took the whole fleet off automatic. Mercer nodded. Smart. Mason looked at him. You sound impressed. I can be impressed later. The 6 ships ahead began closing the last gaps between them. Behind, the rest of Varesh's fleet spread wide enough that the maintenance pods could no longer shape everyone at once. The human advantage was collapsing. Then Brooks spoke over the circuit. Jack, I have something weird. Mercer noticed the first-name basis immediately. Brooks only did that when things were serious. Go ahead. The gravitational current is stronger ahead than the old survey says. A lot stronger. Mason checked his instruments. He is right. It is pulling toward the outer boundary. Claire frowned. Can we use it? Brooks answered before Mercer could. Maybe, but not with the engines running normally. Mercer understood where the engineer was going and disliked it immediately. No, you have not heard the idea yet. You call me Jack. I know it is a bad idea. Brooks ignored him. If we cut main thrust for 12 seconds, the current will carry us below their interception plane. Then I restart everything at once, and we ride the shear out. Mason stared at the numbers. That could work. Could? Claire asked. There is also a chance we miss the exit by several hundred miles. Mercer looked at the ships ahead. Less than a minute remained. Varesh's voice returned over the open channel. Your deception is finished, Commander. There is nowhere left to go. Mercer watched the distance fall. 40 seconds. 39. He thought of 184 people waiting on his decision. Then he looked at Mason. Can you fly it? Mason took one breath. Yes, sir. Mercer keyed engineering. Brooks, on my mark. Claire glanced toward him. What do I tell our audience? Mercer looked at the open communication channel. For the first time since the chase began, he smiled. Nothing. Claire shut it off. On the Dominion sphere, the human voices vanished instantly. Varesh leaned toward his display. The Resolute's engines went dark. Syrah watched the cruiser drop into the gravitational current and understood before anyone else. They are not stopping. Varesh's eyes narrowed. The human ship fell beneath the interception line, gathering speed as the current seized it. Syrah gripped her console. They are letting Morrow Gap fly the ship. For 12 seconds, the USS Resolute became the fastest powerless ship in Morrow Gap. The engines were dark, the navigation thrusters were silent, and Mason Reed had nothing but momentum, gravity, and a rapidly changing set of numbers between 184 people and disaster. 6 degrees low, Claire Bennett called. Still dropping. Mason kept both hands on the controls, even though the controls could do almost nothing yet. I know. Commander Jack Mercer watched the 6 Varkesian ships above them slide past the forward display. Varesh had built a wall across the expected escape route. Mercer had simply stopped using the expected route. 8 seconds, Brooks said from engineering. Coolant loop is ready. Main drive is going to complain when I bring it back. It can file a complaint tomorrow, Mercer said. 7 seconds. On the Dominion Spear, Varesh watched the human cruiser fall beneath his interception line. Follow them. Syrah Vel shook her head. We cannot. Our ships are under manual control. Half the fleet would need different correction angles. Then send the nearest group. For Varkesian ships, turned downward. Syrah saw their projected paths and felt a chill. Admiral, stop them. Varesh looked at her. Why? She enlarged the gravitational model. The current below the Resolute was narrowing. Because Mercer is not escaping through open space. He is aiming for the convergence. Varesh stared at the projection. The human plan suddenly made sense. They had not been trying to outrun 32 ships. They had been forcing 32 ships to choose between following them into terrain the humans understood or letting them go. Recall the pursuit group, Varesh ordered. This time, the order came too late. On the Resolute, Brooks counted down. 3, 2, 1. Jack, I hope you bought the extended warranty. The main engines came alive. The cruiser shuddered as thrust met the gravitational current. Mason pulled the nose toward the narrow exit corridor. Warning lights filled his console. We are too low. Mercer did not move. Correct. I am trying. Do not fight the current. Use it. Mason eased his hands instead of forcing the controls. The ship responded. Slowly at first, then all at once. The Resolute swung around the convergence point and shot toward clear space. Claire stared at the velocity reading. 17,000 miles per hour and climbing. Behind them, the 4 pursuing ships tried to make the same turn. They could not match the human trajectory and were forced to abandon pursuit, climbing away to safer space. Nobody on the Resolute cheered. Not yet. Mercer looked at the tactical display. The path home was open, but Varesh still had most of his fleet intact. Commander, Claire said, the flagship is transmitting. Varesh appeared on the main display. Gone was the contempt from earlier. You could leave, he said. Mercer studied him. Yes. Yet your weapons systems are active. Claire glanced at Mercer. She had noticed it too. During the maneuver, Brooks had quietly restored power to the Resolute's defensive systems. Varesh continued. So this was never only about escape. Mercer leaned back. It became something else when you surrounded a civilian transit route with 32 warships. Varesh's eyes narrowed. You are one cruiser. I can count. Then leave. Mercer looked toward Mason. Hold us here. Yes, sir. Syrah stepped beside Varesh. Her display showed something the Admiral had not yet noticed. The human maintenance pods were still transmitting. More importantly, the Varkesian fleet was still scattered across Morrow Gap, separated into small groups by the gravitational currents. The humans had escaped, but they had also mapped every ship in the fleet while doing it. Syrah lowered her voice. Admiral, Mercer can see all of us now. Varesh looked at the tactical display. For the first time, the Resolute possessed a clean firing solution across the entire formation. Mercer opened the channel again. His voice was tired, calm, almost conversational. Admiral, I am going to give you a choice you did not give us. Varesh said nothing. There is a safe corridor 12 degrees to your port side. Take your ships and go. Varesh stared at the single human cruiser. And if I refuse? Mercer glanced at the names of his crew scrolling across a status panel, then back at the alien admiral. Then we find out how expensive your pride is. Syrah watched Varesh's face and finally understood the part of humanity her models had missed. The humans had not spent the last hour proving they were fearless. They had been afraid the entire time. They had joked anyway. They had worked anyway. And now that they held the advantage, Mercer was offering his enemy the one thing Varesh had never offered him. Away home. For 11 seconds, nobody on either bridge said a word. 32 Varkesian ships sat scattered across Morrow Gap, while one human cruiser waited beside the only clean route out. Admiral Varesh looked at the firing solutions covering his fleet, then at Commander Jack Mercer on the screen. An hour earlier, Varesh had mistaken ordinary conversation for carelessness. Now he understood that the ordinary things had been the point. The jokes, the coffee, the argument over dinner. Humans carried those things with them because danger did not get to decide who they became. You have the advantage, Varesh said. Yes, Mercer replied. And you are allowing us to leave. Also yes. Varesh studied him. Why? Mercer glanced toward Claire Bennett, then Mason Reed, then the status board showing 184 crew members still aboard. Because I wanted my people to get home. I figure some of yours probably want the same thing. Siravel lowered her eyes. Varesh said nothing for several seconds. Pride had carried him into Morrow Gap. Pride had told him laughter meant weakness. Pride was now asking him to gamble thousands of lives simply because accepting mercy felt worse than losing. He finally turned to his navigation officer. Signal every ship. Take the corridor. Sira looked at him. Varesh did not return her gaze. One by one, the Varkesian vessels changed course. The Resolute held position as they passed. No weapons fired. No victory message followed them. Mercer simply watched until the final contact cleared the gap. Then he exhaled. Mason, take us home. The bridge seemed to breathe with him. Claire leaned back in her chair. So, are we allowed to panic now? Mercer picked up his coffee, tasted it, and made a face. Give me 5 minutes. 3 weeks later, Sira stood before the Galactic Strategic Council with the intercepted human recordings playing through the chamber. Delegates listened to Claire defending Pineapple, Brooks accusing her of culinary treason, and Mercer refusing to choose sides. A few counselors seemed confused. Nobody laughed. Admiral Varesh believed this conversation demonstrated poor threat awareness, Sira said. He was wrong. She brought up the Resolute's navigation record. Every tiny correction appeared beside the casual conversation. While the humans joked, they had identified surveillance, mapped the pursuit, protected their crew, and prepared an escape. Human humor is not the absence of fear, Sira continued. In some circumstances, it is what they place between themselves and fear so they can continue functioning. Back aboard the Resolute, life had already become boring again, which suited Mercer just fine. Repairs were nearly finished. Mason had finally slept. Claire had called her mother. And Daniel Brooks was sitting in the galley with his left arm in a support brace, staring suspiciously at a slice of Hawaiian pizza Claire had placed in front of him. One bite, she said. You promised. I promised under extreme circumstances. Still counts. Brooks looked toward Mercer for help. Mercer had a fresh cup of coffee this time. You are on your own, Chief. Brooks sighed, picked up the slice, and took a bite. Claire waited. Well, he chewed thoughtfully. For one dangerous second, she looked hopeful. Still terrible. Claire threw a napkin at him. Mason laughed from the next table. Mercer smiled into his coffee and looked through the galley window at the stars moving quietly past. Somewhere behind them, diplomats were studying reports about human tactics, human psychology, and human resilience. They would write complicated theories trying to explain what Varesh had learned in a single afternoon. Mercer suspected most of them would miss the simplest part. Courage was not always standing without fear. Sometimes courage was knowing exactly how bad things were and still finding room to laugh with the people beside you. Sometimes strength was having the power to punish someone and choosing to give them a road home instead. And sometimes surviving the worst hour of your life meant returning afterward to something wonderfully ordinary, sitting around a table with people you almost lost, arguing about something that did not matter at all. Because maybe that was what made it matter.